All right, so we're fine at the final conversation, and this is the commitment conversation. So, something that I've been noticing a lot, especially when it comes to business or those kind of arrangements, is that everybody's looking for a commitment. Sales is about commitment. Mergers, all of this is about commitment. So it's almost like everybody's working backwards. They start with the commitment, and then there's responsibility. People are starting to find their roles, but then they go backwards into the dissension, and that's when things fall apart. So commitment to me is when all of the other conversations have taken place: the appreciation, the possibility, the invitation, then the healthy dissension, responsibility. That's where commitment and action comes, and it comes naturally. It comes with a flow. Any kind of disagreements have already kind of been worked out through the agreements, the conditions, and the preconditions. So, my commitment to you is to present to you how a quadrillion-dollar GDP really is possible, and how it is possible that everybody could be earning, a living wage, a living income. So before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about WINfinity. So what is WINfinity? I met Trey Ashley Guerin back in January of this year, 2021. So Trey from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, came to our core fellowship, and we all really, really hit it off. And she introduced this idea, WINfinity. It's not an organization, it's not an initiative, it's not a process. It's a placeholder term for whatever it is that we're exploring. It's our due north, so to speak. And the due north of WINfinity is thriving through change, thriving through transition. So that kind of challenged me to really explore what my own due north is. And my own due north is, trust. How do we establish deeper trust in order to shift the paradigm, shift the financial system, which will also shift the relationships we have to each other, to a hierarchy, to authority. So WINfinity, I would certainly recommend, speaking with Trey, about her history, because the history of WINfinity is her history. But one of the stories that she tells often, and that I find fascinating, is how she brought this matrix process, this process of integrity, to Colombia, in Bogota, with finding pathways to justice or pathways to efficiency, in having all people treated equally. So she came to our core fellowship for the Karmic Margin Call project back in January. And, I've learned so much from her. I've been through 3 rounds of integrity pattern conversations, which are the 6 conversations I've been talking about. So the first time through, was just about integrity pattern, was just about just being in the same space and having conversations, deep listening, and just exploring what we were all about as human beings, not as positions or representations or roles, but who we are as people. And then I went through a second time through with another 7 or 8 people involved from Trey's world, and we really focused in on ongoing inquiry. That it's not about having the answer or having a proprietary solution, but in engaging in the ongoing inquiry. And then my third time through was as a supportive facilitator for a financial inquiry cluster, where we were talking about ideas like stewardship, finances, fiduciaries. So I'll tell you a little bit of takeaways from that conversation in a moment. A lot of people involved. I think we had a meeting yesterday, a closing ceremonies meeting with WINfinity. where we talked about what happened this year. What are some of the projects that are in the works just from our conversations. Trey and Parmjit Nahil and Marta Reese and I have been kind of forming kind of a new core foundation for WINfinity. We're meeting new people all the time, who are assisting and helping with that. So we've as far as my conversations with others in WINfinity has been concerned, there's been about 40 or 50 people, who are starting that conversation. But we're hooking into other networks through the WINfinity, process, even though it's not a process. So some of the takeaways that I've learned this year, one is the matrix design. So I'm going to show you that real quick. So the matrix is something I'm going to be spending a lot of time with here over the next year in building the data on what people really want, how people really want to change the system. So there's not a shortage of solutions. There's not a shortage of ideas. There's not a shortage of nonprofit organizations who are trying to help things. What's missing is just the integrity of being able to talk and really be able to identify values in order to come together and consider courses of action. So I pulled up real quickly my matrix here from the Deep Democracy group, where you can see on the left side that there are courses of action that we have considered, and across the top are values that are in the form of questions. What happens is we put values to them, the yes, maybe, or no, and we come up with kind of like a score for what is the ideal pathway that we all seem aligned with. And the values also kind of reflect, okay, where do we feel we need to focus attention to? Like if we feel like if we're going to, for example, in this Deep Democracy, if we're going to invite candidates from opposing parties into this circle, into this space, what values do we feel might not be honored? And one of them is that not everyone might be heard equally, that the politician likes to dominate. That's our assumption, that's our judgment, but it's something that we're aware of, that we value people being heard equally. So I wanted to just show you quickly the a matrix here on our Excel spreadsheet, but what's also in the works at the moment is an app, to make the matrix process more accessible and easier, so that more people can participate in that process of looking at the data and looking at what really matters. Another thing that came up was I'm not directly involved with this, but because of the design of the Matrix app, we're looking at regenerative platforms and integrating technology on how to just have these conversations and to be able to measure the outcome, and to go to other organizations and say, look, this is the data, this is the hard facts, as it were, of what the field is telling us is needed, and how to include more people in these decisions. So I'm hoping that we're also going to be continuing our financial conversation, in the form of a stewardship conversation or a fiduciary conversation. We met with, there were 11 of us in our group throughout October and November. And in my opinion, some of the greatest minds, came together, and we're still kind of taking it apart. The financial system is very complicated, even for the experts. And I found out in our WINfinity conversation around finances that, there are 6 different forms of experts in the field. I have to credit Tim McDonald with the Bank of Nature for this one. There are 6 experts. There's the affluent, or what they would call rich people. There's the do-gooders, what I would call humanitarians. There's the super fiduciaries, there's money lenders, price makers, and the government, all with their different logics, all with their different agendas. So one of the things I'm interested in exploring creating data around, how do we start these conversations, these integrity pattern conversations, first within the cluster of experts? Like, how can we help, wealthy people speak to other wealthy people, like this? How can we have humanitarians speak to humanitarians like this, and government, and so on and so forth? How do we let go of the roles and the representations and the positioning to just have a human conversation, and then let the data speak for what is the next logical step forward? So that's something that came out of that. So these are all takeaways. This integrity pattern of the 6 conversations came from my exposure to WINfinity, and Peter Block's variations of these 6 conversations. So yeah, I think I went over everything that was a takeaway from the WINfinity conversation, and that's something that I'm going to be deeply immersed in this year as well. And I would like to invite you to, if you're not even sure where to begin, WINfinity is a good place to start. And again, it's not about. We had that conversation yesterday about the closing ceremonies for WINfinity, and there were some people who were there for the first time, and they were saying, like, I don't know what this is. I don't know why we're here. And that's a good place to start. And my first question to them and to you would be, what are you most curious about? And we'll find the conversation, we'll find the commitment by just exploring what you're curious about first. So here's the value. The value is progression, progressiveness, that the financial system is just a social and psychological construct. Okay, it's made up. It's just something that is the imagination of the collective, of all of us. And because it's a construct, we can reimagine it. And when I go into the final part of this presentation, I will invite you to explore, a quadrillion dollar GDP, how we all have responsibility, for, I don't know if it's possible to end war and end poverty and end hunger, but we can certainly take responsibility for our part in enabling the systems that make those conditions possible. And we can change that. So my invitation here in the final part of this conversation will be to look at in what ways has the financial system become extractive, and in what ways we can, as individuals, take responsibility for changing that, for changing our relationship to time. So again, progressiveness. The financial system is just a psychological and social construct that we can reimagine. So my commitment to you today, as I go into the final part of this conversation, is to invite you to reimagine the financial system, to reimagine stewardship, to explore what stewardship is. So my commitment to you is to look at, what proprietary solutions, where that has brought us, and what are the possibilities of just changing that system one conversation at a time. So I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll do a review of where we've been so far and start exploring where we're going.